Instead of focusing on anything logical, like making sure the vehicle doesn't overheat and is drivable, no, we're gonna focus on a budget stereo build. Smart. Big brain. Smart, actually. Now, on a previous conjugal visit of ours, I videotaped us doing some weird stuff with this HYANKA 6.5-inch coaxial speakers. But these speakers, surprisingly, sounded better than the Pioneer speakers that I basically throw in everything when I need a speaker that I don't want to really put a lot of thought into it. So after carefully consulting my crystals and doing a few lines of bath salts, well, I decided to try the HYANKA component set and see how it sounded. Now this is the outside of the box, and if you think this is nice, boy, you're gonna love the inside of the box, because that's where the magic happens. Now I know what you're thinking, wow Matt, those are some nice plastic bags and cardboard cutouts. I say nay. This manual is amazing. This is what I expect out of like real American companies, to tell you like actual install tips and guides of how you should put this thing together so it doesn't sound like trash, that they want you to install their product well. Unbelievable. You know what? I'm not into it. I've got some speaker grills here that don't look like they were a cross between Cyberpunk 2077 and Tron, which is a nice touch. Then we have a 1-inch silk dome tweeter that's mounted into a little pod. And if you need an off-angle pod, well, they've got you covered with this off-angle pod. And now we make it to the 6.5 layer beefy boy of the Taco Bell HYANKA menu. Rated at 550 watts RMS and a blow your back out of 1,100 watts, I think it'll do okay. It's got a heavy-ass rubber-coated magnet with a standard plastic cone and a rubber surround. Nice touch is these little quick disconnect speaker. Now don't get me wrong, it's a nice gold-plated touch, but I'm a big fangirl of soldering all my speaker connections, so... Then we get to a decent little selection of install screws, T-nuts, and a little bit of wiring. But now we get to the crossover, which is one of the reasons I chose this speaker setup, besides that it was cheap. Got something in my throat there. Now use your Inspector Gadget eyes on this crossover case. And by case, I just mean two pieces of plastic basically screwed together with these little fingies. But I was specifically looking for a crossover we could strip the case off and get naked with, and hide on the backside of our kick panel. What better way to do it? But other than that, it looks like a basic run-of-the-mill crossover with a little bit of adjustability built in for your tweeter. But now we're going to turn this flatboard into still a flatboard, but with specifically sized round holes cut into it. Wow, that's nice. But to do all of that, we gotta do what we do best. Drink a shitload of White Claw, and then use the cardboard to make a template for the area that you need to fit your speaker. Now let's be honest, your pattern doesn't have to be White Claw based. It could be truly based if you're White Clawing on a budget, but as long as it's a thin cardboard, gets the general area, it'll be fine. Now remember, if you're going to carpet this, leave a little bit bigger gap than you expect around it, because you're gonna have some rollover and the carpet's not gonna compress too much. If you're upholstering it with like vinyl or a fabric, well, go ahead and make your pattern fit as tight as possible, because, well, it's not gonna cover up the gaps nearly as bad. If you accidentally cut an area too far, well, just put some masking tape ass to ass, or, well, sticky to sticky, I guess is a better way of phrasing it, and then just recut it. Gonna take our painstakingly crafted White Claw template, transfer it over a board, jigsaw that sumbitch out. We're gonna be left with something that probably fits. I usually like to cut these kind of things a little oversized and sand it to fit, but since we're gonna be covering this panel with carpet, nah, the gaps will be fine, doesn't matter. Just gonna cut it right on the line, it'll probably be okay. Famous last words. And now we get to the problem of putting a straight board into a non-straight car. Clearly this area right here is showing bisexual tendencies. Make another little template out of alcohol-based cardboard and create a little wood filler panel. But since it's such a small piece, it'll just explode if I get a drill anywhere near it. I'm just gonna throw some wood glue on it and clamp it for a little while. Now, because of the design of this cove, we got plenty of space for a 6.5-inch speaker. Clearly, that's what the Germans wanted. But if you don't have an empty cavity like this to work with, well, just keep on adding boards to your kick panel to make it a little bit thicker. That way you've got the depth you need, but it will eat into your interior space, but what are you gonna do? Well, and while there's really nothing wrong with that method, just make sure it doesn't get into a space that you kick it every time and damage your speakers. Now, just like how I accidentally overcut the White Claw-based cardboard template, well, the same thing can happen with wood. And I did that. To fix that, I'm gonna use quick wood. It's basically like quick steel, but beige. This stuff is way stronger than your average run-of-the-mill wood putty, so it can take some abuse, and if you hit it with like contact adhesive or any sort of paint or spray, it doesn't expand. And believe me, your upholstery will get destroyed if you use regular wood filler and then go to hit it with glue. It expands underneath your vinyl. I've seen that happen a billion times and it really sucks. Just do something else. Now, while we're waiting for the wood filler to cure to fix all of my craftsmanship issues, we're gonna take some measurements from the back of the speaker to cut some holes. Now, using basic trigonometry with a sprinkling of geography, I cut this hole. And now comes the time where we answer 3 basic questions. A, Matt, why are you the way that you are? Okay, sure. And then also A, how do you mount an irregular shaped object into an already irregular shaped object? Well, to answer all that and more, I'm gonna cut 2 little pieces of wood. That should pretty much clear it up. And then we're going to reinstall our fabricated kick panel to find the best spot to use these boards as a spacer. So then I gave it a little bit of Sharpie love so I could drill some holes. Now be sure to make sure there's nothing on the other side of these, so when you go car ramrodding with a drill through there, you're not cutting through a fuel or a brake line. Well, the brake line's okay, but fuel, that could cause a problem. Now I drilled 5/16 holes so I could run 1/4-inch bolts in it and have a little bit of wiggle room. Then I went ahead and assembled everything back together using electrical tape and masking tape and fear, and I need to mark where those holes are on my actual wooden panel. Since I made this spacer out of multiple pieces of wood rather than one solid like 2x4 chunk, well, now we can embed hurricane nuts or T-nuts in between the layers. Now I like to use threaded inserts because I found that just, drilling screws through this thing doesn't really hold it over the long term. It's probably just because the vehicle's bouncing around, hot, cold, wood shrinking, expanding, all that fun garbage. But burying these kind of threaded inserts in here, that should be what you need. And before you run into this problem, just go ahead and drill into the board behind this board and a little bit into your panel. That way, if the bolts go a little bit too deep, never had that problem. That way it's got a little bit of a relief zone. The bolts aren't perfectly sized. Now, once I got the hurricane nut buried in there, I like to glue and screw all this together because there's going to be a considerable amount of tension on this little area. Now, before we install the speakers, I'm going to use a belt sander to clean up all of our corners, edges, putties, your buddy things that I messed up in the design process, and just generally making it look not awful. So this is where I want to mount the crossover, but it just won't fit with this plastic casing on it. And using my patented warranty void screwdriver, well, we're going to void that warranty. I used 2 washers under each corner to give the circuit board a little bit of spacing. That way the solder joints just weren't hammered into the wood. And then I used a top piece of plastic to wire my connections. The benefit about components is you can send the right signal to the right speaker at generally the right time. Now I've got my main speaker input leads from my amplifier on the bottom, then it's got the mid and then the tweeter. Now I went ahead and just set the tweeter up at 0 dB gain. That means it's not really giving her extra juice, not really giving her less juice on the top end. Now if you've got a tweeter that's mounted like right at your face, well, you're probably gonna have to fix that with EQ, but also you could just go ahead and dial it back down to the -2, but if your tweeter's in some weird spot, you might kick it up a -2. Personally, I like to set my speakers up fairly neutral and then handle any EQ changes by bumping it up on the head unit, sometimes twice on Sundays, and just handling all that where I can get my fingies on it at a moment's notice. I like to give all my speakers a little service loop. I use some zip tie hold downs to hold my wires so I can keep track of them. And then I ran all that HYANKA goodness down inside my crossover. Now it pays at this step to give it a little bit of wiring organization, because if you're going to be bolting this kick panel in, well, if you have those wires in the wrong spot, they're just going to pinch and you could have a short. To avoid all that, just use as many zip ties as you need to cover up all your problems in life. And now let's listen to these bad girls join the Bad Girls Singing Club and hear some music. Can you believe it? A couple of days work and we are no closer to getting this car drivable. No, but it's got most of a stereo system, and actually, stay tuned. We're gonna be installing the HYANKA hidden subwoofer system, well, underneath one of the seats. Not sure which one yet, but I got a feeling we're gonna be installing it. Basically because I already have it, so we should definitely install it. How do I feel about the 6.5-inch component speakers from HYANKA? I'd say they're pretty much comparable to any entry-level speakers I've ever heard. About the only way you're gonna get better sounding speakers at this price point is buying them used. And we all know that buying used car audio speakers is like buying a '94 Honda Civic. There's gonna be some problems. It's gonna be a little rusty in places you wouldn't expect it to be rusty, and there's no title. Or if there is a title, it's gonna be salvaged. So, ironically, there are also good reasons not to buy a Honda Civic. So, we've really derailed in this video, but I think what we needed to cover has been covered. The Civic thing, not the speak. It's fine.